let's picture this. Zion, Illinois. It's spring 2005. You've got kids out on bikes, maybe, laughter, on quiet streets. Families are getting together for Mother's Day. There's that feeling, that promise of summer just around the corner. Seems idyllic, right? But underneath all that small town calm, well, there was a shadow lurking. A young guy whose face just blended in. Outwardly, he'd later seem disciplined, even joined the military. But inside, his world was just terrifyingly dark. So today, we're doing a deep dive into the really chilling story of Jorge Avila-Torrez. And this isn't just about one man's awful crimes. It's really a story full of serious mistakes in the justice system, incredible resilience from people who survived, and importantly, the huge role forensic science played.
Absolutely. And our goal here for you listening is to pull out the key insights from, well, all the sources we've looked at, articles, research, our notes. We want to help you grasp the full picture of this really harrowing story. We'll look at how innocence was just stolen, how justice took way too long, and how the truth, it only really came out after years of pain. We'll trace Avila Torres' path from this seemingly regular teenager in a small town to a U.S. Marine and then ultimately a convicted serial killer. And we'll examine the systemic lessons that came out of it all.
Yeah, and this deep dive, it's meant to be a shortcut for you to really understand this complex case. We've got some surprising facts, some critical moments that connect the dots across years, across different states even. It's a story that definitely challenges your assumptions, and it highlights just how vigilant we need to be when predators manage to hide right there, in plain sight. Okay, so let's start back in Zion, Illinois. Jorge Avila-Torrez, born in '88, he seemed like a pretty ordinary teenager, Later joined the Marines. For years on the surface, there wasn't much that really made him stand out, just another kid in town.
But, what's critical, and you often see this looking back, are those early, maybe subtle signs. Things that were there, but just really easy to brush off at the time. People who knew him sometimes mentioned he kept to himself, had a sort of coldness about him, maybe an unnerving lack of empathy. Small things, right? Maybe not enough on their own to raise alarms. But now, it makes you ask that tough question. What signs do we miss? What signals are there when someone dangerous is, well, developing right under our noses? We tend to rationalize things, don't we? Especially if someone seems normal. It's a bias that can let disturbing details slide until, tragically, it's way too late.
And then came that awful day, Mother's Day, May 8th, 2005. Two little girls, Laura Hobbs, 8, and Crystal Tobias, 9. Just friends out riding their bikes, full of energy, enjoying the day. But then evening comes. They don't come home. The search starts. Desperate families calling their names, that awful dread just settling over the whole community.
And the next morning brought the worst possible news. Their bodies were found in a wooded area, attacked with just shocking brutality. The town was completely shattered, innocence gone, panic set in, and the pressure on the police, investigators, it was immense. Find who did this, now. And that kind of intense public pressure, sometimes paradoxically, it can push towards wanting quick answers, maybe even over being absolutely thorough.
Right, and that pressure, that need for answers, leads us to a really, really frustrating part of this story. Before we get into that, it strikes me in that kind of chaos, that emotional pressure cooker, investigators have such a heavy weight on them. Where do they even begin? Where do they usually start looking in cases like this?
That's a really important point. In the immediate aftermath, the focus, sadly, but often necessarily, turns inwards, towards those closest to the victims, family members. It's difficult, but it's standard procedure. And in this case, suspicion landed pretty quickly on Jerry Hobbs, Laura's father. He had a prior record, known temper issues. Things that, unfortunately, made him seem like a plausible suspect to investigators under pressure.
And, incredibly, after hours and hours of intense questioning, Jerry Hobbs actually confessed. He confessed to killing his daughter and her friend. But this is where it gets really interesting and, frankly, deeply concerning about how the system can work or fail. A confession seems like the end of the story, right? But not here.
Absolutely not. This case is a textbook example, really, of how vulnerability, combined with certain intense interrogation methods, can sometimes lead to false confessions, even when the physical evidence says something else entirely. Jerry Hobbs was questioned for, I think, over 10 hours straight. Research shows people, especially under that kind of extreme stress and exhaustion, can be coerced. They might confess just to make the pressure stop, sometimes even convincing themselves momentarily. It's a stark reminder, we have to look critically at confessions, especially when other evidence just doesn't line up.
And that's precisely it. Despite that confession, there was this massive, glaring problem. DNA. DNA found at the crime scene did not match Jerry Hobbs. So, how did they square that circle? Why did this man stay in jail for 5 years? 5 excruciating years, accused of killing his own child when the science pointed away from him.
Well, this is where something called tunnel vision likely came into play. It's a known issue in investigations. Once they zero in on a suspect, especially if they get a confession, there's this strong tendency to see all the other evidence through that lens. Contradictory evidence. It gets downplayed, maybe explained away, sometimes even ignored. It's not always intentional malice, but it's a dangerous systemic flaw. The system, maybe wanting closure, maybe swayed too heavily by that confession, locked onto the wrong person. And all the while, the real killer, Jorge Avila-Torrez, was just walking free, unnoticed, for years.
The consequences are just devastating. Not just for Jerry Hobbs losing 5 years of his life under that shadow, but for the victims' families denied real justice. For the community, it meant the actual perpetrator was still out there.
Exactly. It prolonged the agony for Jerry Hobbs and his family, absolutely. But critically, it delayed justice for Lorik and Crystal, and it left the real killer free, potentially, to harm others. It hammers home a vital lesson. A confession, especially one obtained under pressure and contradicted by forensic evidence like DNA, should be a huge red flag, not the final word.
So, while the justice system was stalled, focused on the wrong man in Illinois, Avila-Torrez wasn't idle. He was moving on, taking his darkness with him. Let's fast forward to 2009. By then, Jorge Avila-Torrez had enlisted. He was in the Marine Corps, stationed down in Virginia. He's wearing the uniform, going through the discipline, the training. Outwardly, he's projecting this image of a serviceman, someone upholding order. But underneath, those violent impulses were still there, maybe even getting stronger, hidden behind that very effective facade.
That's right. The structure, the discipline of the military, it can ironically provide a really effective cover. It masked that inner darkness. It's chilling because it reminds us that predators don't fit one mold. They can operate inside highly respected institutions, using the trust that comes with those roles to blend in, which makes them even harder to spot.
And then, inevitably it seems, tragedy struck again. Proof that the predator was still active. July 13th, 2009. Amanda Jean Snell, just 20 years old, a Navy intelligence specialist. She was found dead in her barracks room at Joint Base Meyer-Henderson Hall in Arlington, Virginia. That sent huge shockwaves through the military community. A murder inside what's supposed to be a secure environment.
And just like before, the case went cold. Avila-Torrez, he just faded into the background again. Completely unsuspected. He continued operating under the radar, a ghost in uniform, really. With no immediate suspect, he could just continue his patterns. It really highlights why connecting these seemingly separate cases is so critical.
But the turning point, the event that would finally start to unravel everything, came in 2010, February. A terrifying night in Arlington. 2 young women, home in their apartment. A stranger breaks in violently.
It was a complete nightmare. He tied them up. One woman was dragged into his car, assaulted, strangled, and then just left for dead on the side of a road. It was just an unspeakable level of violence, a horrifying escalation.
But then, something incredible happened. A miracle, truly. She survived. She was weak, terribly traumatized, obviously, but alive. And her bravery afterwards, her ability to give investigators details about her attacker, that was everything, wasn't it?
Yeah.
How vital was her survival and testimony?
Oh, absolutely pivotal. Her survival, her courage to recount those horrific details that gave investigators the thread they desperately needed. And crucially, from that Virginia attack, they collected DNA evidence from the scene and from her. That single piece of biological evidence became the key. The scientific proof that started to unlock Avila-Torrez's hidden, violent world. It really shows how one person's resilience can completely change the direction of multiple investigations and finally start to bring justice.
So not long after that attack, the police connected to Jorge Avila-Torrez. He's arrested in 2010. But how did that one piece of DNA from Virginia manage to link him all the way back to Illinois, to those murders from 2005?
Okay, so this is where the power of forensic science, specifically DNA databases, really comes into play. DNA, as you know, it's like our unique genetic barcode. It's incredibly reliable. Even a tiny sample can potentially link someone to a crime scene with near certainty. It's the gold standard. So when Avila-Torrez was arrested and his DNA sample was taken, standard procedure, it was entered into CODIS. That's the Combined DNA Index System.
CODIS.
Right.
Can you explain briefly what that is, how it works across states?
Sure. CODIS is basically a huge national database run by the FBI. It lets law enforcement compare DNA profiles. They compare profiles from crime scenes against profiles of convicted offenders and sometimes arrestees, depending on state laws. Think of it like a massive digital library of DNA fingerprints. When Avila-Torrez's profile went in, bingo. It hit. It matched. First, it matched the DNA from the Amanda Snell murder scene in Virginia. Then, the really shocking hit. It matched the DNA from the 2005 murders of Laura Hobbs and Crystal Tobias back in Illinois. That was the moment. All the pieces just slammed together, crimes years apart, states apart, suddenly linked to one person.
Wow. That must have been just
Mhm.
an unbelievable moment for those investigators. A real aha moment after so many years of dead ends and, frankly, a terrible injustice. Finally, the truth was emerging. Jerry Hobbs was exonerated, freed, and the real killer was identified.
And what came next just solidified it, the confessions. While he was waiting for trial, Avila-Torrez was put in a cell with an informant, a man named Osama El-Attari, basically another inmate working with the authorities. In their conversations, they were recorded. Avila-Torrez talked. He talked with this disturbing calmness about what he'd done, admitted to the crimes, no remorse, none. He gave details only the killer would know. Those recordings became absolutely damning evidence, just laid bare the depth of his depravity.
So the legal system took over. Justice, finally, started rolling forward. In 2014 federal court, Avila-Torrez is convicted for murdering Amanda Snell. The sentence was the death penalty, plus multiple life sentences for the other attacks in Virginia.
Right. But it didn't end there. His legal journey continued. In 2018, he finally faced charges in Illinois for killing Laura Hobbs and Crystal Tobias. He took a plea deal there, admitted guilt, and got sentenced to 100 years in prison in Illinois. That plea essentially ensured that whatever happened with the federal death sentence appeals, he was never getting out.
And that brings us to a much more recent event, something that happened just in December 2024, and touches on really big ongoing debates in the U.S. The president commuted his federal death sentence, changed it to life in prison without parole. This was, understandably, a very controversial decision.
It absolutely was, and it really highlights the ongoing societal arguments we have about punishment, especially the death penalty. For some people, commuting the sentence was seen as an act of mercy. It aligns with the view that capital punishment is, well, inhumane or outdated, that the state shouldn't have the power to execute, regardless of the crime. They focus maybe on life without parole being sufficient punishment.
But I can imagine for others, especially the victims' families perhaps, it felt like a profound injustice. This man caused so much devastation, took innocent lives, and he spared the ultimate penalty determined by the court. What's that side of the argument?
Yeah, the counterargument is strong and often comes from a place of retributive justice, the idea that the punishment must fit the crime's severity. For crimes this horrific, many believe the death penalty is the only just response. For them, commuting the sentence might feel like it diminishes the victim's suffering or undermines that ultimate sense of accountability. It really throws into sharp relief these incredibly complex moral, ethical, and legal questions. How does society balance justice for victims with principles about punishment, mercy, and the finality of death? There are no easy answers, and this case sits right at that difficult intersection.
So when we look back at this whole case, the story of Jorge Avila-Torrez, it's just a harrowing deep dive into pure monstrosity, really. But it's also, as we've seen, a powerful reminder of weaknesses in our systems and also the strength of human perseverance in finding the truth.
Exactly. There are critical lessons here. The danger of rushing to judgment, the devastating impact of wrongful convictions, like what happened to Jerry Hobbs. That's a huge one. It also shows how predators can hide so effectively, even inside structured, trusted institutions like the military. They use that trust as camouflage. And maybe above all, it just underscores the incredible life-saving power of DNA evidence. How science can uncover truths that might stay buried forever, offering a path to justice even years down the line.
And it leaves us, and hopefully you listening, with some really haunting thoughts to wrestle with. You have to wonder, how many more years could Avila-Torrez have gone on? How many more lives might have been destroyed if not for that one incredibly brave survivor who fought back? And the investigators who had the persistence to keep looking, to test that DNA across state lines, connecting those terrible dots.
Because sometimes the real monsters, the darkest ones, they aren't in stories or nightmares. Sometimes they're walking right alongside us, completely unnoticed, until finally the truth gets dragged, kicking and screaming into the light.
If you enjoyed this video and want to dive deeper into more cases like this one, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like the video if you found the story compelling, and share it with your friends and family who might be interested in true crime and mysteries. By subscribing, you'll stay up to date with all our latest content and join a growing community of curious minds exploring the most fascinating cases. Click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything.